Welcome to this video seminar all about descriptive writing aimed at those of you that are studying for your GCSE in English language. There is usually going to be somewhere in the qualification a requirement for you to write imaginatively or creatively or descriptively, and this is hopefully going to help with that task. I'm going to be using in this video these three images, which probably look quite familiar to you, depending on the past papers that your school or college has used, because these are three examples of images that AQA have already used in relation to the paper 1 question 5 task. Very different, as you can see. So we have a picture of a kitchen, I think, here, a picture of a train which is being hit by very stormy seas. I think that's in Dawlish, which is a village or a town in Devon. And we've also got the picture of the older gentleman from a few years ago. So these three images have already come up and they might look recognizable to you. So those are the three images that I'm going to be using to be creating this video with you today. So essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through each of these images one by one. Underneath the images, I have the skills which the examiner will be looking for, or some of the skills that you will get marks for. And very simply, like in a previous video, I'm going to be typing some ideas in terms of what a piece of description might look like in relation to these images for this particular past paper. So I'm going to start with the picture of the kitchen, because this was an image that came up about 2 or 3 years ago now, I think, from memory. And some students liked it because there were lots of things to describe. And some students were a little bit, they found this a little bit difficult because it is just a room. And there's lots of mysterious objects and artifacts in this room. And I think some people struggled a little bit with how to develop their ideas for 45 minutes because they found maybe that once they'd described the kitchen, there was nothing else to say. So you've got to then kind of include things yourself in order to add in the detail. Okay, so let's see what we can do. So I'm going to start this piece of writing with a verb because it's always a good idea to change your word order and begin your sentences with different types of word. So I'm going to start with a verb, and I'm also then going to use an adverb. Perched perilously on an old wooden shelf. So I'm drawing the reader's attention to the shelf on the right hand side of this image where all the glasses are. Rows of glasses had been arranged so that they were organized in colors. Okay, so this is an example as well of zooming in. Seeing specifically some of the objects and some of the smaller details that you can see, and describing those smaller details will create vivid imagery. And this is what I want to do. So I want to continue with this idea of the light. Sometimes when light passes through stained or coloured glass, it creates a nice kind of dappled, colourful effect, like a mirror ball almost. So I've got perched perilously on an old wooden shelf. Rows of glasses had been arranged so that they were organised in colours. As the light penetrated the glass, patterns and streaks of colour were printed on the whitewashed walls. Like see if I can use a simile. So where do we see stained glass? We see stained glass a lot in things like churches and cathedrals. So let's say like the clear April sunshine pushing through the stained glass windows of an old church. Got a simile in there. As the light penetrated the glass, patterns and streaks of colour were printed on the whitewashed walls, like the clear April sunshine pushing through the stained glass windows of an old church. And let's use a preposition, so below, so to do with location really. Below this, bowls and plates, lent, against, strange, ornaments, because some of this is quite mysterious, um, which were of sentimental value to their owner. Another preposition, next to the shelves. So I'm now moving around the image, kind of changing the perspective a bit, shifting the perspective. Next to the shelves were windows that looked, that overlooked, that overlooked the jungle, offering a panoramic view of the treetops amid a chorus of birdsong. So to me, even though we can't really see outside, I imagine this room kind of being out by like in a tropical jungle almost. This doesn't look like a home in the UK, for example. It looks like it's overseas in the Amazon rainforest or something. So to me, it says it's in quite an exotic, humid, jungle-like place. So that's what I'm going to run with here. So offering a panoramic view of the treetops amid a chorus of birdsong. The milky afternoon light washed through the kitchen, comma, casting shadows into obscure corners of the room and up to the ceiling, where wicker lampshades hung from old beams above the central island. Semicolon, so punctuation is varied and used accurately. The lampshades swung back and forth as they were stroked by the whispers, kind of personification here, by the whispers of the spring breeze. Finally, let's kind of change the perspective now to outside. Outside, the sounds of footsteps grew closer. Short sentence there to kind of change the dynamic of the extract. We're now going from long, complex, detailed, descriptive sentences to something which is more precise because something is kind of happening here. So outside, the sound of footsteps grew closer. Preparations for dinner were about to begin. Okay, so there we have an example. So I can't see anybody coming into this room, but I can imagine this is almost like a Sunday afternoon. The person that lives there is going to be cooking Sunday dinner maybe for their family. So this kitchen is going to become a hubbub of kind of kitchen and food and culinary delights and all this kind of stuff. So it becomes suddenly much busier. Maybe the person was out shopping or something or in the garden, I don't know. But perched perilously on an old wooden shelf, rows of glasses had been arranged so that they were organised in colours. As the light penetrated the glass, patterns and streaks of colour were printed on the whitewashed walls, like the clear April sunshine pushing through the stained glass windows of an old church. Below this, bowls and plates leant against strange ornaments, which were of sentimental value to their owner. Next to the shelves were windows that overlooked the jungle, offering a panoramic view of the treetops amid a chorus of birdsong. The milky afternoon light washed through the kitchen, casting shadows into the obscure corners of the room and up to the ceiling, where wicker lampshades hung from old beams above the central island. The lampshades swung back and forth as they were stroked by the whispers of the spring breeze. Outside, the sounds of footsteps grew closer. Preparations for dinner were about to begin. So that could be, half of your answer or a third of your answer. and you would develop that by continuing to describe maybe this person making um, their their lunch or something. Remember, the question says suggested by this picture. Write a piece of description suggested by the picture. So the main thing is that students need to use this picture in some way, and that's what I've done. So the rest of my answer could be completely different. It could be about a completely different room. That's absolutely fine. You don't have to write about the whole, your whole answer doesn't have to be about the whole room. It can be, you know, different rooms. Okay, so don't be restricted or limited by this image. It's supposed to be just a prompt. Okay, so that's one example. We then move on to the picture of the train being struck by the sea. Like I said, I think this is Dawlish in Devon, and Dawlish is quite popular because of the fact the train track is right at the seafront, like this. So clearly, I think this is Dawlish. So again, let's see if what we can do here. So let's start with the verb again. Waiting for the train to begin moving again. So I'm going to imagine that I'm on the train and I'm kind of in that train. So that can be a kind of a perspective choice that you can make. You don't have to be always describing these images from an outsider perspective, like an omniscient perspective. You can actually be in the image or put yourself in a particular location in the image, like I am here with the being put inside the train. So waiting for the train to begin moving again seemed to be taking forever. Why weren't? So we can always put questions in our descriptive writing. Why weren't we moving? With my phone now clinging. I can spell it right. Clinging on to a 10% battery, I glanced out to the angry sea, marveling at how the huge waves crashed and splashed against the sea wall. So an examiner would look at that and they would say, crashed and splashed, they're quite violent verbs, but they also are quite sibilant. They've also got that hissing S sound, which an examiner might say, or a reader might say, represents the sound of the sea kind of hissing. You can almost hear the sea hissing here and the strong wind of this storm. Erupting in explosions of spray, the concrete was being battered and attacked, assaulted and hit by an army of rollers, which is another word for waves, rolling in, that idea. I think surfers often talk about rollers as in riding the rollers, I think. But here, what I've decided to do here, and you'll notice this, is I'm deliberately choosing to use words which are to do with quite violent fighting. So I'm kind of trying to create this idea that the train or the land is at war with the sea. There's always going to be this conflict between the sea trying to reclaim the land, and that's why we put up wars and defences to protect the land. But you'll notice here that I've got lots of verbs, lots of words which we would associate with fighting and war. And some of you might call that a semantic field if you're going to really push it into the higher level terminology. A semantic field of words which are to do with fighting and to do with combat, really. Curtains of spray, it's a bit of a metaphor there. Curtains of spray then threw themselves over my train. Because remember, we're sat in the train, making us all feel quite unsafe. Preposition, opposite, a row of houses, glanced out to the, so a bit of personification, they're glancing. Tempestuous, which is an adjective to do with stormy. It's where Shakespeare takes his um, title for the Tempest from, because that's also um, about stormy weather. It's tempestuous. Ocean. Opposite, a row of houses glanced out to the tempestuous ocean. Their windows were like eyes, bit of a simile here, blankly staring out of their trenches. Again, using that noun trenches, because trenches, we associate that with fighting, and particularly the First World War. So again, it continues that theme. Defending their territory. These homes, which were probably, so a which sentence, you've got those commas in it, different type of sentence, a complex sentence. These homes, which were probably Victorian semis, had been painted in a variety of colours, making them appear striped and vivid to the eye. Occasionally, bit of an adverbial there to begin. Occasionally, if I can spell it right, occasionally a figure would walk to a window as if to check that the sea had not broken through the sea wall and invaded. Continuing to use those words to do with fighting and war. Satisfied, adjective to start, that their homes were still safe and the enemy was still safely caged behind the concrete defences. They would disappear again into the mysterious depths of their homes as the waves relentlessly rolled in. Okay, so another example there of a piece of descriptive writing, a micro piece of descriptive writing. That could be half your answer there. If you were to write that out by hand, it might be a page long or so. Let's just proofread and check that it's all right. Waiting for the train to begin moving again seemed to be taking forever. Why weren't we moving? With my phone now clinging on to a 10% battery, I glanced out to the angry sea, marvelling at how the huge waves crashed and splashed against the seawall. Erupting in explosions of spray, the concrete was being battered and attacked, assaulted and hit by an army of rollers. Curtains of spray then threw themselves over my train, making us all feel quiet and safe. Opposite, a row of houses glanced out to the tempestuous ocean. Their windows were like eyes blankly staring out of the trenches, defending their territory. These homes, which were probably Victorian semis, had been painted in a variety of colours, making them appear striped and vivid to the eye. Occasionally, a figure would walk to a window, as if to check that the sea had not broken through the seawall and invaded. Satisfied that their homes were still safe and the enemy was still safely caged behind the concrete defences, they would disappear again into the mysterious depths of their homes as the waves relentlessly rolled in. Okay, lovely. So some lovely long detailed sentences there, really creating that sense of imagery for the reader. They can almost visualize this image without actually having to see the image. And that's what good descriptive writing is. It always relies on the senses to create that vivid sense of place. Lots of language there, lots of semantics and verbs, to do with war and fighting, and the examiner would pick that up as almost like an extended metaphor, an idea that's been consistently conveyed throughout the whole of the piece of writing. So with that, think about putting yourself in the image. I've imagined there that I am a passenger in that train that's had to stop maybe because of the sea and it's too unsafe for the train to continue for a little bit maybe. So put yourself in the image if you want to. Finally, the last example is the example of the older gentleman. And with this example, I'm again going to make myself believe that I am that man. So I can become a character, and I'm going to try and make myself into this character. Okay. So we've got our skills there still on the left-hand side, things that we could use in order to make our descriptive writing as effective as possible. So let's imagine that this image is a reflection of myself as I look into a mirror, okay? Because a mirror obviously only reflects what it sees. So there is nothing more honest than a mirror. It will not lie to you or deceive you with falsehoods. There is nothing more honest than a mirror. It will not lie to you or deceive you with falsehoods. It will only tell you what it sees. I suppose this is how artists create self-portraits, to gaze for hours at one's reflection, observing how life and the passing of time has marked one's skin, and how the years have eroded youth. So this idea that the skin of this gentleman, or my skin if I'm imagining I am this man, has been weathered by time, essentially. Happens to us all. These eyes have always been my eyes. Semicolon. This nose was always my nose, protruding from my face. And yet, how weathered they now look. How loaded with emotions of the past, of memories, suspended in midair above my head, like baubles hanging from a Christmas tree. Did my eyes always look this sad and black? Did they always glint like this when my pupils caught the light? So it's okay to have questions, and lots of questions if you want. It shows confidence in your writing to kind of have these very similar sentences, kind of parallels or repetition of the same kind of word order. That's absolutely fine. Are my pupils so black because my soul is cavernous and empty? My skin seems like a wild terrain, made of valleys and peaks. Here are the tributaries of my life, flowing with memory and what has already been swept out to sea. My beard is a forest across, sprouting from the moorland of my chin. Yes, indeed. There is nothing more honest than a mirror. Okay. So what you can do is you can actually make that into a separate paragraph like that, and it emphasizes the fact that you have used a cyclical structure idea here. So effectively your perspective has gone back to where it started by talking about the mirror. Okay, so slightly different maybe in description. It's more of, I suppose, a monologue, but it's still a piece of description. I'm still describing. And what I've done, because I thought it was interesting, is to change the perspective. So rather than commenting on this man as if I'm seeing the man, I have become the man. And I think it's interesting for this man to be looking into a mirror, really staring into the depths of his soul and kind of thinking about the past. And you would develop this very easily by um, describing the room that this man is in, or the place that this man is in, or describing maybe some of the memories he has, or whether or not he is a bad person or a good person. I think from memory, some students made this man into kind of an enemy or a villain, and some made this man into like a sympathetic victim. So you can choose to kind of characterize this man however you want to. So let's just read through this and check that it all makes sense. And if I have to tweak anything from proofreading, I will. So there is nothing more honest than a mirror. It will not lie to you or deceive you with falsehoods. I suppose this is how artists create self-portraits, to gaze for hours at one's reflection, observing how life and the passing of time has marked one's skin, and how the years have eroded youth. These eyes have always been my eyes. This nose has always been my nose, protruding from my face. And yet, how weathered they now look. How loaded with emotions of the past, of memories suspended in mid-air above my head like baubles hanging from a Christmas tree. Did my eyes always look this sad and black? Did they always glint like this when my pupils caught the light? Are my pupils so black because my soul is cavernous and empty? My skin seems like a wild terrain, made of valleys and peaks. Here are the tributaries of my life, flowing with memory in what has already been swept out to sea. My beard is a forest sprouting from the moorland of my chin. Yes, indeed, there is nothing more honest than a mirror. Notice here, like in the previous example, I had the semantic field of war and fighting. Here, towards the second half of that paragraph, is a semantic field to do with nature and kind of geographical things like forests and moorlands and rivers and seas. So it's almost kind of organic. I've almost gone down an organic route with the description of this man, of myself. We are, of course, part of nature. We are also a living organism in the same way that a tree is, in that sense. So we are also living and breathing like plants and animals. So I think that's what I wanted to emphasize here, that we are equal to nature, not superior to it. Okay, so hopefully that was useful. Just kind of three examples there of how to write descriptive writing using these very familiar images, probably because they have been around now for many years for descriptive writing. All images that have been used by AQA in the past for students to write a piece of description. Okay, so thank you very much for watching and good luck in your studies and speak to you soon. Thank you.